Hi students, today we're talking about artistic composition. For those of you who have taken photography 10, 20, or 30, or all of them with Miss Moore, you might be well acquainted with some of the concepts we're going to be reviewing today as they relate to composition. For those of you who haven't, don't worry, you're not at a disadvantage. That's what this lesson is for. If you'd like to follow along and fill in some blanks and make notes on your own page, by all means, print off the student copy that's attached with this tutorial, and you should be able to follow along no problem. So at its most basic, composition is relatively easy to recognize and evaluate. If you actually looked into your camera right now, I'm sure you'd find that a lot of these things you're already doing, but it's important we're able to label them and know which concept we're applying to our own composition as we take photographs. So each time that you look at a work of art, you must make conscious decisions as to whether or not it is appealing, and then you must consider how this is achieved. Determining appeal will be part of the first grade task for you this semester. So just keep in mind that the arrangement of the content is something we're looking for constantly. So we're looking at 5 principles today. The first one, leading lines. Some of the most extraordinary photographs allow the viewer's eye to follow a line spanning part of the photograph composition or all of it. Sometimes leading lines extend from one landscape foreground to its background. So in this case right here, if you were to look at this photograph, you'd actually see that there's a line that takes us from the foreground all the way into what is the start of the background. Same line actually, or the same destination is met by another line which comes in all the way from the side here. And of course the horizon line that kind of runs along top. You can kind of see it comes crashing down here at the bottom of this mountain before it gets into some more depth in the background. So there's a lot at work in that one picture. However, the other lines can guide the viewer's eyes just as easily. So imagine a stem or a blade of grass stretching across your image. Although it is not a leading line by the foreground-background definition, it certainly provides a path for a viewer's eye to follow. If you look at this picture right here, I find it's interesting because I usually ask students, what is the most engaging part of the photograph? And I usually say the blue stinger here. You're going to find that if you start at pretty much any side of this photograph, right? You start at the top, your eyes will follow, and then eventually here. Start at the right, same thing. Eyes will follow and eventually you'll end up here, and the same is true from the other two directions. Keep in mind that artists do this with great intent, especially photographers. It's interesting to see how they actually will back up further and further away from a subject just until they can find a leading line that leads to it. The rule of thirds, probably one of the best known in terms of photography. If you actually took out your iPhones are known for this, they'll create a little grid if you go to edit your photograph, and usually that grid goes right to the rule of thirds. So imagine dividing your photo into 9 parts. So if you divide your photo into 9 parts, you'd have 4 points of intersection. Here, here, and here. So you could actually put that little grid over top of any photograph you find, and you'll be able to tell if the rule of thirds is at work. So if we look at this photograph here, is the rule of thirds at work? Well, if you have your page and you're following along, or if not, I can still point out to you that it is in fact at work. While we might have a leading line that curved in a curved way takes us to the middle ground and eventually the background, there is some content here and some content here that actually applies the rule of thirds. Now you don't have to hit all 4 intersection points. Some people think that you have to hit all 4. Technically, you could just hit 1 or 2, and you're still using the rule of thirds. It's drawing us in away from the border, away from the middle of our subject, and it's trying to put things off balance in terms of maybe focus or where the subject really lays, or lies on the page, rather. Balance. Rather than the rule of thirds, many photographers are composed with the idea of balance. So this means you're balancing left to right in halves or top to bottom, or maybe you're balancing another way, like areas of contrast, bright spots, items in focus, warm colors, large items that are unique in appeal. So look at the photograph down here. We actually see balances at work here in a very special way. We see a small dragonfly which immediately catches your attention. If you stare at the photograph for a few more seconds, all of a sudden your eye is drawn down here to this part of the photograph, where the blade or the weed that is sticking up out of the bottom of the photograph seems to carry as much weight left and right So that really creates for us a sense of balance in the photograph. Some of you who are looking at might say, well, one is kind of more of a living object. The other one could be dead. It could be at the top of a tree. It's hard to have any context. In this case, we're really looking at it from left to right. And not only that, both subjects are very, very dark and not very well focused on. So actually, while we can see little branches coming off of this, we can't see any of the refined details of color with either of them. It's almost like they're shadows in a way. So in that way, they're balanced too. Imbalance is pretty neat. At the same time, consider that not all photographs have perfect balance. In fact, sometimes the lack of balance creates tension. And that's actually something photographers are going out intentionally to find. Imbalanced photos can make a photograph great. If you want to show the tension and drama in a landscape, an imbalanced photo could be the perfect tool. So this could be catching the subject that you're taking a photograph of, the thing you're photographing, on an awkward angle, catching things moving in different directions. Like in this case, there's a lot of top to bottom movement here from the water, but then the current is swelling and taking it in a different direction. And not only that, there's a clash or a contrast of values here, lots of lights right next to darks. And a lot of that is creating imbalance as well. And if you go over here, the mist met with the refined shapes creates imbalance too. So there's a lot of imbalance at work in that photograph. One thing that a lot of people find challenging for the sake of photography is really bringing focus to a single subject. So one of the best ways that you can do this for a particular landscape, look for simple scenes with simple structures. And by really letting your camera actually focus, which means the background, so you can see the exterior of this photograph is actually not focused, or not in focus rather, and the only focus really lies on the subject in the foreground. Look down here, another great example. We have a clear, distinct subject. It's clear against the backdrop of the sky. It's clear in its shape. Everything seems very defined. I can follow the tracking lines alongside the mountain. I can also see where there's small valleys within. The simplicity of it keeps it minimal or minimalistic, and that does great value to the subject of the photo. So although this might look complex with simple lines and things, at the end of the day, we recognize that this horizon line here of the mountains meeting the sky is really the breathtaking image. And not only that, there's a little bit of contrast from simple and kind of an empty sky to the darkness down below. So a clear subject. So those are your 5 different elements of artistic composition you'll be focusing on for your first creative project, which is your landscape photo collection. If you have questions about any of these 5, let me know. I'd suggest that you go and get some practice. Walk through the halls without photographing other students or teachers, of course, and attempt trying to find leading lines. They're really easy to find. If you take a photograph of any hallway, you'll see the lockers or the leading lines or the floor tiles or the ceiling tiles or just the base of the wall or the wall itself. I suggest that you try playing a little bit with how these leading lines can lead to the subject that's the focus of your work. The rule of thirds are probably at work in a lot of your photographs. So even if you take out an existing photograph, click edit on your phone, usually presents with a grid or some kind of grid over top. And again, just take a chance, try out some photography now, and then when you're ready, go to your first creative task. And if you have questions at that point, you can always, again, email, start a Google Hangout, or seek me out Mondays or Wednesdays at lunch for some help. Take care.